All right, module 6. So welcome, receptive language, kind of, as I say, part 2. So last week, hang on one second, and then we'll hear the fun doorbell. So last week we talked about receptive language, and we, kind of did an overview. Like I said, I feel like language in and of itself is hard to delineate between the two. Typically speaking, though, kind of receptive language develops and then your expressive language develops. So that's kind of the starting point for many of our language goals when we're working on language, providing services for language. And of course, anytime you're working with a client and you're unsure of where to start, or the goal, you're trying to address the goal and things aren't going well, receptive language is a good fallback. We always can support that. So project, and I just noticed the session plan form is not uploaded. I changed it a little bit last semester. Every semester I change it a little bit, make it more, user-friendly or organized differently. But let's talk about the project. Wait, hold on. Let's do some read and review first. 1 second. So therapy. So really this week when we're looking at therapy, so this kind of reviews receptive language, understanding words. So building blocks. So quick review. Some building blocks to develop receptive language is attention and concentration. So generally speaking, and this is, like I said, a gross kind of stereotype or kind of statement. Of course, every situation and person is a little bit different, but truly, I cannot stress enough, attention is that building block of language. So poor attention oftentimes results in poor language abilities, maybe poor pragmatic language, poor semantic language, functional use of language. So attention is critical to build receptive language. Pre-language skills. So when we're looking at pre-language skills, so things such as gestures, facial expressions, imitation, joint attention, eye contact. So joint attention is critical, and not just when we're looking at the signs of autism, you'll see that a lot, but that's critical for all developing people. So joint attention is critical, and imitation. So sometimes you guys will be working and you'll see what I call a goofy goal, because it's kind of like, I'm the speech therapist. What's going on with this goal? So sometimes you'll read a goal and it'll say, client will imitate actions when singing along with a song. Client will imitate, physical gestures in 4 out of 5 trials. So you're like, what's this about? So imitation is kind of that pre-language skill too. So oftentimes we're trying to address receptive language. We're working on these pre-language skills before we get to language. So these are kind of what I call critical pieces. Social skills, definitely that reciprocal. Can they look at you? Can they maybe wave? If somebody says their name, do they look at that person? So definitely some of those verbal or nonverbal kind of what I call beginning language skills, and then play skills. So play skills is definitely super critical. So when you're reading reports and it'll say, client did not parallel play with others, or client didn't engage in reciprocal play, or client just parallel play. So a lot of times they don't play at all. Then we're trying to get them to play, and then we're just trying to get them to do what we call parallel play, where they just kind of play next to somebody, maybe not engage with them, but do something similar that a same age peer would do. And then that engagement piece is next. So how do we tell if there's receptive language problems? So a lot of times, and this can look like other things too, it's not just receptive language, but have difficulty attending and listening, not paying attention within group times, not following instructions that others the same age would follow, respond to questions by repeating what you said, instead of just giving an answer. And sometimes it looks like echolalia, sometimes it doesn't. They might just repeat often what you say, but it's not necessarily what we would call echolalia behavior. Or echolalia behavior, oftentimes we know there's receptive language difficulties, or give unusual answers to questions. So other things that we see, poor receptive language skills oftentimes lead to challenges with other issues, especially when we look at executive functioning, processing of any kind. To me, processing just means your neurocognition. You're taking in the environment, the language, the stimuli. So processing to me kind of equals cognition in many different ways. And then social skills and literacy. And behavior for sure. So improving. So a lot of times, how do we improve it? So in therapy, oftentimes we're working on these pre-language skills, or we're trying to address difficulties that they're having as far as maybe understanding questions, understanding vocabulary. But really, I cannot stress to you guys enough as therapists, and this is one thing I think, people who've had me as their supervisor or, mentor, whatever you want to say, us as therapists, as a general rule, and I'm critical of teachers for this too, but we're too wordy. As speech people, we want to just talk. But really, my co-therapist, she says it best. She's like, I want caveman speak. Go sit, chair, sit. Like, bag up. So, backpack down. 1, 2, 3 words tops. A lot of times we're working with people, and this is really true for adults too, who are having difficulty with language. We got to really reduce the verbiage. So like I said, she calls it caveman speak, 2 words, kind of that, action agent kind of thing. What are you going to do with what? Or, noun and verb kind of phrases. And really what we're trying to do is really get that content in before we start to elaborate. Obviously, we don't want anybody talking that way, but oftentimes they can only process the language of their abilities. So they're only using, 2 words. Let's be talking, a minimal, smaller sentences, smaller structure, especially with given instructions or kind of what I would call directions. Definitely minimize the verbiage. So as therapists, really breaking down our, just our language to the client. So chunking verbal instructions. So here's a good example, go and get your lunchbox and your hat and go outside. Okay, get your lunchbox. Okay, that's step 1. Now get your hat. So oftentimes we call that scaffolding. Let's scaffold information, scaffold the directions. Repeat. Oftentimes what I do as a strategy is have them repeat what I just said. And oftentimes when they repeat, then it starts to give me information about what they're actually listening to. So oftentimes I also find that sometimes kids with some really significant language difficulties, they're paying attention to the wrong words. They're not hearing those functional words. So then I try to reduce my sentences and sentence structure even more. What is the word I want them to pay attention to? Is it walk? Is it stand? Is it write? Is it pick up? And definitely pick up is one of these things that is kind of more vague, actually. We'll say, pick up your shoes, pick up your clothes, pick up your pencil. So it's kind of used in different ways, or really when we say, pick up your toys, we're wanting them to actually clean up, that kind of stuff. So sometimes you have to think about your words and how you're using them. First then is absolutely, you will see that over and over and over again. First then is a great strategy. First, you're going to do this, then you're going to do this. And oftentimes you have to just do first. Wait till they do first, then you could give the then. Clarifying. So oftentimes we need to clarify what we said or explain what you mean by that. What did I say today? And I asked the kid, do you understand what that means? Oh, somebody said preview. And it clearly my student who's fourth grade, he was not understanding preview. He wasn't sure what that meant, especially when we're doing stuff on the computer and they want you to preview it or whatever. He was not understanding that he needed to hit yes. Yes, he wanted to preview it so he knew what it looked like. So I kind of had to explain that to him. So it's oftentimes I'm always amazed about words I take for granted that people know, because oftentimes they don't know what they mean, what it means, or the intended meaning. So show, you know, we might model it. And to me, showing, modeling, kind of the same thing. Visual aids, pictures, gestures, facial expression. So describing, oftentimes too, I do kind of that narrative language piece. I'll describe what I'm doing. Oh, we are going to, you know, pick up all the Legos and put them away on the shelf or something like that. So sometimes I'm giving them more language input because I'm narrating what I'm doing versus giving them a direction or giving them a direct question for them to answer. So sometimes I do a lot of narrative language for language input. Other times I really reduce my language as far as getting them to understand, respond, etc. So again, that's when we look at, sometimes we do need to be more verbal, sometimes we need to be a lot less verbal. And emphasizing the word. So oftentimes when they repeat something, I know what's their emphasis, what they're listening to. So that's kind of a key piece that I really like to use to explain to explain my SLPA or explain to the teacher, look, this is what they're hearing. And oftentimes it's the last word that you say. So definitely that repeating helps let people know what they're listening to, what that person is processing. And that's really true for our phasic clients also. Because a lot of times when I have them repeat, that's when I start to see some of their progress. The more that they repeat that they heard, we know their language is improving or making improvements. So reducing background noise, reducing distractions. Oftentimes I like to get on their level. I know when I did home health or clinic based, and if the client was on the floor, oftentimes you would see me. I like to be lower than their eyes. So I like to not have the child look up at me. I like to have the child look almost down, because oftentimes it's less intimidating and you're kind of getting on their level. They get more facial input. So oftentimes you'll see me lying on the floor, like on my side. I will often be on the floor, almost, looks like I'm, going to take a nap or something. But I like to be lower than the client, because oftentimes I get more interaction that way. And of course, that's not always helpful for everybody, but definitely little ones, I like to be as face to face as much, because it is intimidating when you look up. And also too, some other components or other disabilities, looking up isn't always easy for them to do. And then other visual things too. It's usually, most of them can look down and you can get in that lower visual field, which is, I find it helpful. So I do like to do that. Books are really an easy go-to, a good start. And so other activities, so naming items. That's what I said, talking about day-to-day activities. Definitely that narrative piece, and what I call, it's like running the play-by-play about what's going on. Model new words. So often, they're playing with something, you're introducing words, you want them to use it, you want them to now like name it or label things and use that word functionally. So oftentimes, sometimes maybe we're reading a book and the word isn't maybe functional for them at the moment. So how can you use that word in a functional way? Sometimes you can't. When you're reading books, it's just maybe more vocabulary exposure, but explaining new concepts. So for instance, that's where we look at those multisensory approaches. So explaining to somebody who might have a language difficulty, might not be learning new language, has limited language input and output. How are we going to explain something? What other modality are we going to use besides words? So, you know, other fun things, obstacle courses, Simon Says, you know, kind of what I call the mystery box. Lakeshore has this mystery box thing that I had one. Finally, I don't know what happened to it, but I had it. It was probably one of the first things I bought as a SLPA. And you could put items in it and then they'd have to like stick their hand in and feel. So definitely it was like a fun little activity I did at Circle Time. And I did it with not just preschoolers, but I did it with older students also. So I definitely kind of like some of those multi-sensory things. Like I said, books and other things too. So you kind of read through this, it has great ideas. And oftentimes when we're not addressing receptive language, kind of be familiar with what difficulties they might have. And also just know they have difficulties with receptive language. They are likely going to have lots of difficulties with expressive language also. So I don't want to say one develops in the next. That's not really true. But we do know that some of these things, when left to, if we're just focusing on one piece, it's not you work on one or the other. Like I said, language is really hard to tease out, but when in doubt, receptively is always a good go-to if you're working on expressive, because a lot of times they might be good at pointing, they may be good at choosing objects, that kind of thing. But what we're really looking to is that receptive piece across a variety of modalities. So if their expressive is challenged, we do know that likely there's some difficulties with receptive language. Not always. There are a few disorders where we could see, you know, great receptive skills and very, very, very poor expressive skills. But likely you're always going to be working on both skills. It's just when you're looking at goal targets, sometimes one's more than the other. This is more receptive language than expressive, or this is more expressive than receptive. So there's some great, oh, this is one. Hold on, no. ASHA. So always when in doubt, go to ASHA. And they changed this page. And it's no longer, hold on. Can you guys see this page on ASHA?
You're not sharing your screen.
No, we can't.
Hold on 1 second. Sorry, let me do that again. So this is the practice page. So when we're talking about different disorders, these are on here. And it used to have language kind of separately, but it's not anymore. But let me go to the language. You can look at kind of spoken language, and we kind of look at written language, social communication. Those all relate to receptive language. I don't like how ASHA kind of divided some of these things. Hold on, there's another one I wanted to show you. But when in doubt, usually look on this page. It gives you, it's late language. 1 second. I guess it took it out. It talked about kind of parts of language, and that's more under speech sound disorders, that's more archaic. That's not really language. Spoken language disorders. And then when you can kind of look at some of these other things, late language emergence. I don't think that's the one, but this is more just your average language delay. You can kind of look through that. And when we're looking at treatment, definitely look at what are some of the ways we focus on language. And you can look at direct treatment. Obviously, it doesn't really break language down. It's more language as a whole. But also, too, you'll talk about in other courses, augmentative communication. And that's more on the expressive part, as well as some other more what we call team-based service delivery. And then there's lots of stuff on apps. So there is some great information. Let me make sure these are still working. I checked them out. Sometimes they just change it, but you can look at receptive language, expressive language. This is a nice thing to reference sometimes when you are working with others or you're trying to do some, what I call team training, maybe with a caregiver, maybe with a parent. So definitely there's some great ideas in here on how to support language that are fun. So when we're doing therapy, we try to be fun. I'm not saying it's always fun, but we try to make it fun and engaging, especially for our young clients. So projects. So I want to take some time. Oh, wrong way, sorry. Okay, and I will put the session plan form up here. Sorry, I thought it was on here. I don't know why that doesn't stay in this, but I'll add it for you guys. And I'm going to actually change the due date for this. So just look at that. I usually give everybody a couple extra days for a couple of different reasons. What I'm looking for is I want you to look at this. You're going to submit a session plan form. So here's a client, here are some goals. So I will give you the kind of goals. What are we working on? Like pick 2 goals. What are you going to do in the session? So just remember that when you're planning a session, so you're going to look at the goals. So I'll have the choice of goals and then the template form that you can use. But what I'm looking for, oh, whoops, and I did change that's not 200 points, it's 100 points. So just, sorry, it must have loaded the old one. It used to be worth more. We reduced some of the points on this one this past year. So looking at our session plan, we're looking at the goal and we're coming up with activities to address the goal. So that's really the purpose of a session. So you're going to get a client, you're going to have goals. Okay, what are some activities you're going to do with this client to address the goal? And oftentimes when we're looking at just pure receptive and expressive language, oftentimes we are looking at our very young clients, but it really holds true through the lifespan. If a person has deficits in language, oftentimes whether they're 2 or whether they're 52, we're working on comprehension questions like WH. We're just using content that's important to them. And what's important to a 52-year-old is different than what's important to a 2-year-old. So that's why I put some age ranges. And when I say K3, I'm looking at that young primary school age, preschool. We're looking at, 3 to 5, kindergarten through 3rd grade. 4th to 6th is kind of that upper intermediate level, as well as 7 to 12 is kind of like middle school, high school, and then adult. So language will be something that you work on through the lifespan. It's not really just little kids. It's not just older. It's through the lifespan, as well as expressive too. That holds true for both pieces of language. But obviously you got to kind of pick an age group and then kind of cater your activities that are relative to the age group. So obviously reading a newspaper might be more relevant for a person who's, an adult versus someone who's in middle school. So, now, newspapers are starting to be obsolete, but definitely look at your materials you use to address the goal. What are some activities you might do with the age group? So obviously what you might do with a 2-year-old is different than what you do with a 12-year-old. So that's what I'm looking for. Can you look at 2 goals, come up with activities to address that, and then kind of highlight that. Show me how this activity is going to address the goal. And so things what I'm looking for in a therapy session: how are you going to teach strategies and reinforce the strategies? Make activities interactive. So looking at that multi-sensory piece, how to kind of set guidelines and boundaries with the client. Oftentimes too, we're looking at maybe role playing, giving them practice. How do we give a lot of support, and then how maybe we're going to fade the support? So oftentimes therapy starts with lots of supports, and then we're really working on them doing something independently. So the supports kind of fade away. So we do a lot of fading of supports, as well as also what we're working on too is the goal. So sometimes the activity is kind of step one towards this goal. And that's okay because that's what therapy is. So oftentimes in a session, you're not going to go from not being able to do it to do it. You know, hopefully in a couple sessions you can get there, but oftentimes we're working at kind of those basic levels to get to the goal. So that's kind of your thought process also. So you look at the end goal, how are we going to get there? Now, here's what people ask. Can I use something? I'm always okay. I know other people in our program, other adjunct faculty is not okay with this, but this is what the reality is. If you use something off the internet, if you use something that's not yours, you just have to credit where you got it. So a lot of people say, can I use Teachers Pay Teachers? Sure, you can use that. You just need to credit where it came from, that it's not yours personally, that you made up. And obviously submitting something for your, copyright is always an issue in TPT. So yeah, please don't, publish it on a website for free, things like that. But obviously, you turn in something, that's okay. It's for a class. And what I'm really looking for is, okay, here you go. You got these goals. Cause this is what you'll do as an SLPA. Okay. I need to work on this, this, and this. Okay. I've got some, hands-on activities for this. Oh, I really don't have anything. All right, let me go to Teachers Pay Teachers and see what they got to see if there's something I can use. Or a lot of times they have like great like flashcards and other what I would call more supplementary aids than what I would call session plans. But for instance, today I got something off TPT because I'm working on prioritizing with a few of my kids that just struggle with where do I start? They just don't have a clue. So I have some activities, but then if we've done them, it gets old. You don't want to redo things. I wanted something new. So I looked on TPT and got a couple things that, where they had to order in importance. And there's kind of like a variety of things. So, that's just things we do as therapists. And that's what you will do as an SLPA. You're not making everything from scratch. If you want to make something from scratch, feel free to do so. Or, people have like augmentative, what I call use like augmentative game pieces and stuff like that. We do that all the time. Puzzles, things like that. So I have definitely, I've been known to go to Goodwill, cut up books. I do that quite often actually, because it's way cheaper than color copying stuff. So there's things and resources, as long as you credit where they came from, if they're not yours, that you organically made up, I am fine with that, because that's what you will do as an SLPA. It's like, here's the goals. What are some activities and things I can do to help address the goal? That's what you will do in a day in and day out basis. And that's really what I'm looking for. But feel free to make your own things. Feel free to use, objects and things around the house. Feel free to use functional things that might be relevant to that client, or you can explain how it's relevant to them. So things like that. Those are just components to think about when you're coming up with activities, and think about your age group. So where are you at? Primary grades, intermediate grades, ages. You guys might have kids yourself. What age is your child and what are they into? What are things you can use? So a lot of people ask, can I use websites and stuff? Yes, you just need to clearly explain how you're going to use those materials to address the goal. So as long as you do that, everybody should do well. If you're struggling, this is why I give more time, because some people do need feedback, or some people need some more support in how to do a session plan. So please send me a message. Every now and then, I'll check first thing oftentimes first thing in the morning, and then right before I go to bed. So if you do email me, sometimes it might not get till the next morning or late at night, but I do try to often check, or somebody sends me a message like, hey, I have this, can you look at this? I am always open for that, because what I really want you to do is kind of get this thought. It's more about the thought process down. Okay, here's a goal. How do I address it? Versus what activity you come up with, you're going to get full credit if you remotely try to address the goal and it's appropriate for the age group. So is everybody clear on that? So I'll adjust the due date and I'll upload the template form.
I do have a couple questions.
Yeah,
Sorry. So the first question is there a time limit, or not a time limit, but like a minimum time we need our video to be?
No, your video is just explaining how to, I'm not expecting you to do a mock therapy session. Like
that was my second question, actually. Yeah. When I read the instructions and stuff, my idea was to convince my boyfriend to pretend to be my client and do, like a mock therapy. Because, so we're just, if we don't need to do that, do like a mock therapy, then we just literally need to explain our ideas and our plan for that session. Yeah,
that's what I'm looking for, because to me, you're going to do that when you do that at your in your practicum sites. What you're going to do therapy, and it's really hard to do a mock therapy when you haven't done therapy. What I'm looking for is, can you explain to me how you're going to use it? Because that's what you will do. So, you're my SLPA. I said, hey, Johnny, he's coming up. He's a 13-year-old, but we're still working on some basic concepts. We're working on yes/no questions. We're working on demonstrating understanding of WH questions, thinking, okay, what do I do with the 13-year-old and working on these goals? And when I talk to my SLPA, they're going to explain to me how they're going to do it. Or, hey, I did this session, I did these things, this is what was the challenge, or this is what came up, or this is what I noticed. So that's really what you do in your day-to-day job. Explain to your supervisor how you're using this activity to address a goal. You will do that on the regular, if not on the daily, depending on how much you get to talk and be with your supervisor. But that's what I'm looking for. That's really the work skill in, can you explain to somebody how this activity is going to address the goal? Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, that's really what you will do in your job. So that's what the purpose of the video is. So today, talking about one of my kindergartners, parents send an email, and I treat them probably once a month, but my SLPA sees them like 2 to 3 times a week. I had to talk to her like, hey, I saw you doing that, and we are in the same room, but I don't always get to watch her. Like we do our normal supervision time, but I have a challenging person I work with, same time she works with the kindergartners. So I don't always get to watch the whole time. So I said, hey, I saw you last week, do this. Explain to me, how did that work? How did that go? It looked like she was having difficulty. Give me more insight. So we talk about those things, and that's really what she does. Hey, yeah, I did this activity. She seemed to not understand. I had to model where the things went. She still seemed to not understand basic concepts, is what my SLPA was telling me. So I was like, oh, that's important information for a supervisor, especially when I maybe need to talk to a parent about progress. We're having parent-teacher conferences, and a lot of times they want to come in and see me down in the speech room, how their kids are doing, et cetera, et cetera. So definitely she will explain to me, hey, there's this one game we have and she hates it. She's like, I'm getting rid of it. I'm never playing with it again. It's called Lids and Lizards, and it's a game all the kids ask for, and it's a lot of category stuff. And she was just explaining some of her struggles with using it, because she tried to use it as a reward and it's been a disaster. So she explained to me what happened. So that's really what, goes on in a day-to-day out basis with you and your supervisor. So because they're not always going to be able to watch you with every client all the time. So that's really what I'm looking for with regards to the video. So it's not a mock therapy. You don't need to grab anybody, try to do a mock session. I just want to explain, hey, I'm going to use this. This is how I'm going to use it to address this. So that's what that is for. If you need any more support, let me know. But I'm going to increase the time, so you guys have a little bit more. I'm probably going to move it to next Wednesday. Just don't get behind on other things. But I try to give you more time for this. It is worth a lot. And then we'll be doing another one soon. So this kind of take a little bit longer, than the next one will be easier. And then I'll upload the templates tonight too. Any other questions? All right.
Yes, I have one question. For the
Sure.
goals, is it the age groups? Are they different for each goal or is it different for each project?
No. I would just pick one age group. I do like you guys to try to use different age groups throughout the projects, but I've been more lenient with that. I'm looking for pick one age group and here's your 2 goals. That'll be all in the template. You guys will see that. I got to upload those things because I change them often, like from semester. So let me upload those and then you can pick 2 goals and then the session plan. So just look for that and I'll put an announcement when that's uploaded. So there'll be a list of goals and then the template for the session plan.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All righty then. Well, I appreciate you guys joining me. Any other questions?
Can I ask just one last question? I'm
Sure.
sorry. Can we upload the video on Canvas or we need to upload it on YouTube? Like, is it mandatory that as on YouTube?
You do not have to. If you can upload it to Canvas, you don't have to upload it to YouTube. A lot of people just upload it directly to Canvas. Like I'm looking for a video no more, I'm talking like 3 minutes or so is what I'm looking
Okay.
for. I'm not looking for 10,
Yeah.
15, 20 minutes. So, and often you don't have that much time to explain something like that to your supervisor on a regular day in and day out basis. So yeah, if they're shorter, the shorter videos, a lot of times you can often just upload straight in Canvas. It does not have to
Okay.
be on YouTube, but sometimes that's easier for people too. Okay.
All right. Thank you. Yep.